begrüßen können zur Veranstaltung Kosovo nach den Parlamentswahlen. Die Südosteuropa-Gesellschaft macht regelmäßig Veranstaltungen, die aktuelle Themen zur Region des westlichen Balkans ausrichten. Und wir haben auch eine gute Tradition etabliert, dass wir im Deutschen Bundestag in einer Kooperation mit der Parlamentariergruppe der Europa-Union gemeinsam solche Formate anbieten. Und in dieser Situation ergibt sich dann immer die lustige Koinzidenz, die rein zufällig ist, dass ich nicht nur Vizepräsident der Südosteuropa-Gesellschaft, sondern auch noch Vorsitzender der Parlamentariergruppe der Europa-Union bin. Und deswegen habe ich die Ehre, Sie heute hier begrüßen zu können. Worum es heute geht, es geht heute um Kosovo nach den Parlamentswahlen. Aber man kann natürlich auch sagen, am heutigen Tag der Nobelpreisvergabe ist es so, dass wir vielleicht auch mit gutem Grund auf eine Region gucken, die durch Krieg, Völkermord und Kriegsverbrechen geprägt wurde und immer noch geprägt wird. Und meine persönliche Meinung dazu ist, dass diejenigen, die nicht an der Aufarbeitung dieser Verbrechen interessiert sind, sondern eher in einer Umdeutung oder sogar Falschdeutung, nicht unbedingt die besten Beispiele dafür sind, wie man diese Region künftig entwickeln kann. Die Wahlen im Kosovo haben ein interessantes Bild ergeben. Viele, die dort hingucken, sehen dort zwei Parteien, die gemeinsam eine Koalition formen wollen, die ganz unterschiedlich sind. Manche sehen das sogar als Vorbild für eine schwarz-grüne Koalition in Deutschland. Ich weiß jetzt nicht, ob das so hundertprozentig passt, aber man hört auf jeden Fall von vielen Stimmen eine Chance auf einen Politikwechsel, hohe Erwartungen, Jobs, besseres Justizwesen, Dialog, Aufarbeitung von Kriegsverbrechen. Und man sieht aber auch Partner, die eigentlich von unterschiedlichen Positionen auskommen, die sich auch verändern haben oder auch verändern werden. Und deswegen sind wir sehr gespannt, heute von kompetenten Gesprächspartnern aus der Region und aus Berlin zu hören, was denn jetzt auf uns zukommt. Was wird aus dem Kosovo nach den Wahlen? Ich möchte deswegen ganz herzlich zunächst unsere Gäste aus dem Kosovo begrüßen. Dr. Vjosa Osmani-Sadriu muss man eigentlich nicht vorstellen. Sie ist Parlamentsmitglied der Republik Kosovo und war die Spitzenkandidatin der Demokratischen Liga bei den Parlamentswahlen und ist darüber hinaus, glaube ich, ein Lieblingsgesprächspartner von allen, die Sie einmal besprochen haben, nicht nur zur Entwicklung des Kosovo, sondern auch zu großen Fragen der Außenpolitik. Und es ist eine ganz besondere Ehre, Vjosa, dass Sie heute Abend bei uns zu Gast sind. Herzlich willkommen. Wir haben einen zweiten Abgeordneten aus dem Kosovo da, Glauk Konjufca, auch ein Mitglied des kosovarischen Parlaments, aber eben für die andere Partei, Vetevendosje. Wir haben die Situation, dass Vetevendosje die Parlamentswahlen gewonnen hat, so knapp vor der LDK, wie wir in Deutschland, also die Grünen verlieren immer so knapp den Kampf um den letzten Platz gegenüber der Linkspartei. Und wir haben die interessante Situation, dass wir auf diesem Podium eben die beiden künftigen Koalitionspartner abbilden wollten. Und Herr Konjufca, auch Sie möchte ich ganz herzlich begrüßen als Mitglied des kosovarischen Parlaments bei unserer Veranstaltung. Wunderbar, dass Sie zu uns gekommen sind. Und die beiden Parlamentarier werden, wie es gewohnt ist, natürlich gesidelined von den anderen Gewalten, die sie einschränken und kontrollieren, nämlich zum einen von Veton Surroi, Publizist und Autor aus Pristina, als Vertreter der vierten Gewalt, und der Exekutive, Susanne Schütz, unsere Beauftragte für Südosteuropa, vorherige Botschafterin Deutschlands in Albanien, also auch eine exzellente Kennerin der Region im Auswärtigen Amt. Ich glaube, deswegen haben wir uns hier schon so eingesetzt, um unsere Abgeordneten einzurahmen mit der Exekutive und der vierten Gewalt, den Mädchen. Herzlich willkommen und schön, dass Sie da sind. Und last but not least möchte ich das Wort weitergeben an unsere Moderatorin des heutigen Abends, Adelheid Wölfl. Adelheid Wölfl ist Südosteuropa-Korrespondentin von der österreichischen Tageszeitung Der Standard, lebt in Sarajevo, ist eine ausgezeichnete Kennerin der Region, steht auf meinem Zettel. Ich glaube, das ist nicht untertrieben und ist der Grund, warum manche Berliner Abgeordnetenbüros jeden Tag den Standard lesen. Ich weiß jetzt auch nicht, von welchem Büro ich da rede. Adelheid, das war jetzt da. Vielen Dank.
Danke. netten Worte und die Einführung. Ich freue mich sehr, da zu sein. Und ich möchte gleich am Anfang bitten, Frau Dr. Osmani-Sadriu, sie hat eine Keynote vorbereitet. Ich war vor den Wahlen im Kosovo und da war die Stimmung in Pristina, aber auch in den anderen Städten schon ganz auf den Politikwechsel, wenn man mit den Leuten auf der Straße sprach, ausgerichtet. Und wir sind jetzt sehr gespannt zu hören, wie sich dieser Wechsel nach den Wahlen in einer neuen Regierung sichtbar machen wird. Bitte.
Thank you so much. Dankeschön. Ladies and gentlemen, I will be continuing in English. Unfortunately, my German is not good enough for me to address you in that language today. It is truly an honor to have the opportunity to talk today here at the Bundestag. Thank you, all of you organizers, Mr. Sarrazin, the Southeast European Association, as well as the rest of the organizers, and all of you for being here. It is great to see so much interest for what's happening in my country, the Republic of Kosovo, and also for bringing us together to discuss the challenges as well as the way forward for Kosovo's new institutions. It has been 20 years after the war in Kosovo, and our citizens are yet to see the country that they truly wanted and the level of freedom and democracy that they've sacrificed so much for. For many years, and especially during the last few, the people of Kosovo were losing hope that their most acute problems would be dealt with by the political elite. And in these few years, what we saw in Kosovo was not a political scene that offered solutions to the problems, but rather one that was creating crisis after crisis in order to cover up its failures to work in the interest of the country. On October 6, 2019, it was finally time for a new generation of politicians and a new mindset in governance. It was time for real change. The people of Kosovo voted overwhelmingly to have the previous opposition as their new government. They put Vetevendosje first and my party, the Democratic League of Kosovo, second, with a difference of 1%, giving us a clear sign that they want these two parties to govern together and leave the parties that have governed so far in opposition. No wonder that every opinion poll shows that around 85% of our supporters are in favor of such a coalition. So our citizens spoke clearly. Their vote was a loud cry for change, and now it is our turn to deliver. We've been working closely with Vetevendosje to draft a joint program which will tackle some of the most important problems that our citizens face. While we do understand the importance of foreign policy and that the planet can't wait while we deal with our problems, we understand, however, that topics such as the dialogue with Serbia should not entirely take us away from the domestic policy issues. For about 2 months, we've discussed and agreed on topics such as education, health, economic development, and job creation. We focused on new perspectives for our youth and women, dealt with the most urgent issues related to energy and environment, and made sure that we have a clear plan to reach a final deal with Serbia, which would result in mutual recognition. A precondition to all these, however, is that we focus on rule of law, fight crime and corruption, which is the biggest problem that has been keeping our country in stalemate. Unless we're successful in fighting crime and corruption, we can't even dream of reaching success on areas such as economic development. And it is precisely because of lack of rule of law that our citizens were in such a dire need for change. We've drafted a very ambitious program that will be tackling these challenges. And what we will need further is that people with integrity lead the way for implementing this program. In addition, we will need the helping hand of our partners. First and foremost, that of Germany, the United States, but also other members of the European Union to support these genuine efforts. While we've managed to harmonize our government program in a matter of 2 months, and some may think it's too long, but we're talking about two parties which are completely different in terms of political ideology and program. Now, what we're having is talks that are underway to achieve a power-sharing agreement. and these are taking longer than expected, thus leaving the citizens of Kosovo in a state of frustration because of the so long awaited change. I have to say that as a person that has been engaging for so long, to bring my party and Vetevendosje closer and to have such a coalition happen, I feel their pain and frustration. But at the same time, we should understand that it is the job of serious and responsible politicians to make sure that every single hurdle is overcome now before we start governing together. My party, the Democratic League of Kosovo, is very much interested to build a genuine partnership where good faith, mutual respect, and support for each other, as well as governing with responsibility and integrity, are the alpha and omega of our coalition with Vetevendosje. We will, of course, be facing lots of challenges on justice, economy, and foreign policy. In economy, for example, we need to increase the support for the private sector as the main driving force for our economic growth, but at the same time increase the support for families, for women and children. Right now, 56% of our youth are unemployed, while we have one of the highest inactivity rates among women, where 81% of the women in my country are not working. We need to make sure we shift our focus of investment, and instead of spending our budget mainly on highways and wages, we need to invest in human capital, our most important capital, focus on education and health, so that we can actually increase the level of prosperity of living in Kosovo. In justice, we need to go through a tough but well-prepared vetting process that will cover not just the justice system, but our security institutions as well. Everyone must understand, however, it's certainly not easy. And yes, the challenges are big. But what is bigger than our challenges, though, is our will and resolve to face each and every one of them in a way that will make our people proud of their leadership and of their country. Kosovo has suffered so much for too long. It is our duty to make sure that we speak of those sufferings everywhere we go, so that we can say with all our hearts and souls, never again. It is especially our duty to speak of those sufferings today, not just because of the victims in Kosovo, but also those in Bosnia and elsewhere in the world, at a day when denial of genocide is not only being normalized, but also awarded. It is our duty to seek justice for all those who suffered, but it's also our duty to build a future, one for everyone living in Kosovo, no matter their ethnicity, gender, color, or other background, to build a country where our young generation will want to have their lives and dreams in Kosovo and not elsewhere. I'd like to make my most sincere call to our German partners and all our allies to support our efforts in achieving that. If we are successful in building a governing coalition, and I'm very much confident we will, Germany will find in Kosovo a very credible partner, one that will make all of you proud for standing by our side at the most difficult times in our history. For so many years, Kosovo's brilliant young people have been excelling both in and out of country in sports, music, and innovation. It is about time that we as politicians rise to the level of representation that our sportsmen and musicians and our brilliant youth have been so far. It is about time that we show to the rest of the world that Kosovo can do so much better than what we've seen so far. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the discussions.
Danke vielmals für diesen Beitrag. Ich kann mich erinnern, wie ich vor den Wahlen im Kosovo war, haben viele Kosovaren so viele Hoffnungen in eine neue Regierung zwischen der LDK und der Vetevendosje gesetzt, dass es sogar einige gab, die Frau Dr. Osmani-Sadriu mit der Angela Merkel verglichen haben. Ja, die Erwartungen sind also sehr, sehr hoch, und was man im Kosovo auch merken kann, wenn man mit den Menschen spricht, ist, dass sie immer sagen, also das Wichtigste ist uns die Zusammenarbeit mit Deutschland. Also Deutschland spielt eine unglaublich wichtige Rolle, auch im Bewusstsein der Bürger. Und deswegen dürfen wir jetzt die Frau Schütz bitten, ihren Kommentar zu machen zu den Zukunftsperspektiven, die Frau Dr. Osmani uns jetzt gegeben hat. Und ich wollte Sie darauf aufmerksam machen, dass Sie über dass es eine Simultanübersetzung gibt, Englisch-Deutsch, und Sie das mit den Kopfhörern haben können. Bitte, Frau Schütz.
Ja, vielen Dank, Frau Wölfl. Zunächst einmal möchte ich auch der Südosteuropa-Gesellschaft dafür danken, dass sie diese Veranstaltung organisieren, und natürlich ganz herzlichen Dank auch an Vjosa Osmani und Glauk Konjufca und auch an Veton Surroi, dass Sie hergekommen sind, um hier mit uns zu diskutieren und uns den aktuellen Stand der Diskussionen in Pristina mitzuteilen. Wir sind nach etwas über 2 Monaten in der Tat auch zunächst einmal sehr froh darüber, dass der lange Ausdehnungsprozess zu einem Ende gekommen ist und dass nun die Koalitionsverhandlungen laufen und wie ich auch hoffe, sehr bald jetzt zu einem Abschluss kommen. Vielleicht noch in dieser Woche. Das wäre in der Tat ganz wichtig, denn wir sehen natürlich auch eine ganze Reihe von Aufgaben und Herausforderungen, die nicht angegangen worden sind, dadurch, dass doch jetzt über einige Monate keine Regierung da war. Nochmal ganz kurz zu den Parlamentswahlen. Ich lese hier ein politisches Erdbeben. In der Tat sehen wir auch ein klares Ergebnis, eine klare Mehrheit für Vetevendosje und LDK. Und ich kann sagen, dass auch nach der EU-Wahlbeobachtungsmission diese Wahlen im Großen und Ganzen sehr gelobt wurden. Es gab Kritik an der Art und Weise, wie die Wahlen im nördlichen Teil ausgefallen, in den Kosovo-serbischen Gemeinden abgehalten wurden. In der Tat wurde dort auch über Einschüchterung der Kandidaten gesprochen, aber insgesamt ein klarer Auftrag, eben jetzt auch an Vetevendosje und LDK, zu einer Koalition zu kommen, um die vielen Probleme des Kosovo anzugehen. Eine Sache, das hoffe ich, wird Frau Osmani uns auch noch erläutern können. Formal muss natürlich auch Präsident Thaci zunächst einmal noch jemanden beauftragen, eine Regierung zu bilden. Das wäre in dem Fall dann vermutlich Aylin Kurti. Das ist bislang noch nicht erfolgt und deswegen auch nochmal die Frage nach dem Zeitplan. Ich bin sehr froh, dass Vjosa Osmani und auch Aylin Kurti, der in der letzten Woche hier war, ganz klar die Prioritäten der nächsten Regierung genannt haben, nämlich Kampf gegen Korruption, eine Politik für Rechtsstaatlichkeit. Wir denken, das ist ein ganz wichtiger Ansatz, denn all das wird natürlich entscheidend sein, auch für Fragen zum Beispiel ausländischer Investoren, inwieweit sie auch durch ihre Investitionen am wirtschaftlichen Prozess des Kosovo beteiligt sein können und wollen. Ich wollte noch einen Punkt auch sagen. Sie haben die anderen vielen Herausforderungen aufgezählt, die die Menschen tagtäglich zu bewältigen haben. Und ich sehe natürlich auch, dass die Verantwortung für die Menschen und die vielen Fragen, die die Menschen bewegen, für sie jetzt an oberster Stelle stehen. Aber ich denke, dass der Dialog mit Serbien auch eine der wichtigsten Prioritäten sein müsste, denn es ist eine Frage, die im Verhältnis Kosovo-Serbien ein wesentlicher Stolperstein darstellt und eben auch hinsichtlich der weiteren Entwicklung Richtung EU und für viele weitere Fragen auch wichtig, zum Beispiel Energie ist ein Thema, was auch ohne Serbien wahrscheinlich abschließend schlecht wird geregelt werden können. Das ist sehr, sehr viele Themen und deswegen glauben wir, dass das eine Priorität der künftigen Regierung sein sollte. Die Gespräche mit Serbien haben nun schon seit über einem Jahr auf Eis gelegen Und wir hoffen daher sehr, dass die nächste Regierung das tun wird, was sie kann, um wieder einen Gesprächsfaden herzustellen. Zuletzt waren es die Zölle, die von der Regierung Adelheid eingeführt worden sind, die zum Abbruch der Gespräche mit Serbien führten. Es gab sicherlich eine ganze Reihe weiterer Fragen, aber wir sehen tatsächlich, dass es wichtig ist, auch weil es ein Thema ist, was man nicht auf die lange Bank schieben kann. Wir werden da sicherlich auch noch darauf eingehen, aber wenn man es analysiert, ist es eine Herausforderung für Kosovo, für Serbien, aber auch für die gesamte Region in der Frage der Annäherung an die EU, überhaupt in der Frage der Regelung offener Probleme. Und wenn man es einfach analysiert, wird man zu dem Schluss kommen, dass die Zeit letztlich nicht für Kosovo spielt. Denn es sind viele Dinge, die einfach durch Zeitablauf nicht geregelt werden. Und deswegen denken wir, dass auch jetzt vor dem Hintergrund der neuen EU-Kommission und einem neuen hohen Repräsentanten dieser Dialog mit Unterstützung der EU, des hohen Repräsentanten, bald wieder aufgenommen werden sollten. Ja, ich denke, dass an dieser Stelle, ich kann sicherlich später.
Danke vielmals, Frau Schütz. Ja, wir fangen jetzt gleich an mit der Diskussion hier am Podium. Ich freue mich sehr, mit den 4 Panelisten hier sprechen zu können. Meine erste Frage geht gleich an die Frau Osmani. Ja, Sie haben ja schon ein bisschen ausgeführt, um was es in dieser Regierung gehen könnte. Wir warten ja alle sehr gespannt auf die Koalitionsvereinbarung. Wann sehen Sie die Möglichkeit, dass sie unterschrieben werden kann? Und was sind Ihre wirklich größten Reformvorhaben? Also wie soll der Kosovo in 4 Jahren aussehen? Angesprochen wurden ja schon Armutsbekämpfung, Bildungsreform, vor allem auch für Unterstützung der Familien, aber natürlich der Dialog auch mit Serbien. Und was ich sehr interessant fand im Gespräch heute mit Ihnen, war, dass der NATO-Beitritt eine Priorität werden soll, oder viel mehr werden soll im Verhältnis auch zu einem möglichen EU-Beitritt, was möglicherweise ja auch damit zu tun hat, dass die Erweiterung an sich ja immer unwahrscheinlicher geworden ist. Bitte.
That's a very broad question. How do I see the country in 4 years' time? Certainly, if I could just explain all this in 1 or 2 sentences, I would say in 4 years, I would like to see the young people of Kosovo not want to leave Kosovo. And if I try to explain this further, that means that they will see a perspective for job creation in Kosovo. The people of Kosovo will not feel that the biggest hurdle in their professional and daily life is corruption and crime and lack of a merit-based process to getting a job or advancing in their career. In 4 years, I expect, since we're trying to shift the investment in health and education, to not resolve all issues in health and education, but at least we're going to get our education system on the right path with a 10-year plan that we're building. And then get our health system from the collapsed situation that it is in right now by introducing health insurance system, and we've been working with Germany as well in getting expertise in that regard. In the foreign policy front, I would agree with Ms. Schütz. Absolutely, we're not intending to leave, as I said, to tell the planet to wait while we deal with our domestic problems, because it would not wait for us. We think that our domestic and foreign policy are equally as important, but they are also interrelated. The stronger we are inside as a country, the stronger we will be reflecting as our image outside. The moment we have a credible government which leads by example, We will make sure that we attract more foreign investment, but at the same time, with resolve and professionalism, we should have a much clearer and better plan in terms of membership in international organizations. In that sense, we're discussing today that we need to make sure that our path towards membership in NATO becomes of a much higher importance compared to how it has been so far. We need to work more extensively in that front and not just focus on EU integration and completely forget the steps that we need to undertake towards NATO membership, although I do understand the hurdles that we face because of non-recognizers. So practically in 4 years, I see hope. Obviously, we don't have a magic wand to deal with all of the problems at once. It will take time. It will take patience. But we have the duty to deliver because of the very high expectations that are on us for the moment. I think that as long as we start on the right foot and we introduce some of the very ambitious reforms that are already part of our program, in 4 years, not just the people of Kosovo, but even all of you here in Berlin would be able to see the good and positive changes that will be happening. And if there is anything more specific that you would like me to focus on, I will be. Oh, with the agreement between us and Vetevendosje, how about you bring a piece of paper here and read this? I think it's a matter of days, or I'm not sure. To be very frank, I'm one of the most optimistic persons in terms of the agreement between the two parties, and I think the differences are so small that we should just lock the two parties in a room until they get an agreement. Again, the cause that brought us together is so much more important than what's keeping us apart right now. And I take this opportunity to actually apologize to the people of Kosovo for the frustration that we're causing to them because of they've waited for so long. But I hope that everyone understands, as I said, that we're doing this so that, just like lawyers, when they draft contracts, they try to envisage and foresee every single dispute that might come out. This is exactly what we're trying to do. We want to make sure that the future government doesn't work where partners fight one another, but we work in good faith and cooperation and support one another. Certainly, Mr. Kurti, as the future Prime Minister, and to answer your question, or I'm not sure who asked the question of what's the role of Mr. Paci. Mr. Paci has a constitutional obligation to nominate the candidate of the leading party. And I'm sure the leading party have decided who their candidate is. So if they reach a coalition agreement with us, the LDK, Mr. Kurti will have all the support from us in order to achieve the promises that we've jointly made to the people of Kosovo. Of course, mutual respect is a precondition for that to happen. And I hope both parties will understand, as I said, that while the people of Kosovo have been waiting too long, now it's about time that we deliver. When? Next week? Is that too ambitious? But it's, again, knowing how the circumstances are, I'm hoping that it's a matter of days.
Ja, danke vielmals. Es schaut so aus, als stünden Sie knapp davor. Wenn es um das Verhältnis zwischen der EU und dem Kosovo geht, dann gibt es seit vielen Jahren ein großes Thema und das ist die Visaliberalisierung. Und ich wollte Sie darauf ansprechen, Frau Schütz. Wir sind ja in der Situation, dass wir in den letzten Monaten erleben mussten, dass Nordmazedonien und Albanien keine Zusage bekommen haben, mit den Verhandlungen beginnen zu können, wegen des Vetos von Frankreich. Und wir sehen überhaupt insgesamt, dass sich sozusagen der Erweiterungsprozess sehr verlangsamt hat. Und auch die Vorschläge der Kommission, dass der Rat nicht wirklich auf die Vorschläge der Kommission in dieser Hinsicht eingeht. Und es ist ja auch schon lange die Empfehlung der Kommission, die Visaliberalisierung für den Kosovo umzusetzen. Deswegen wollte ich Sie fragen, wie sehen Sie das? Was muss geschehen, damit es passieren kann und damit vielleicht auch die Mitgliedstaaten diese Empfehlungen der Kommission ernst nehmen in Zukunft, bitte?
Ja, ich kann natürlich verstehen, dass da sehr viel Enttäuschung darüber ist, dass die Empfehlung der Kommission vom Sommer 2018 von den Mitgliedstaaten immer noch nicht umgesetzt wurde. Ich kann leider auch für die Bundesregierung da nicht viel Neues ankündigen. Die Meinungsbildung innerhalb der Bundesregierung ist noch nicht abgeschlossen. Allerdings gibt es Expertengespräche, die auch bereits ein paar Mal einmal in Berlin und auch in Pristina zusammengekommen sind, um die noch offenen technischen Fragen zu klären. Und wir hoffen, dass dieser Prozess auch weitergeht, insbesondere natürlich, wenn es jetzt auch eine Regierung geben wird. Das wird auch diesen Prozess erleichtern. Aber Sie wissen natürlich auch, Deutschland ist nicht das einzige Land, das in dieser Hinsicht noch wartet. Da gibt es eine ganze Reihe anderer Mitgliedstaaten der Europäischen Union, die ebenfalls noch nicht abschließend Ja gesagt haben. Und wie gesagt, wir hoffen, dass dieser Prozess jetzt vorankommt mit der neuen Regierung und dass dann auch Entscheidungen in Brüssel positiv ausfallen können.
Ja, danke vielmals. Herr Konjufca, eines der größten und wichtigsten Themen von Vetevendosje war in den letzten Jahren und jetzt natürlich auch im Wahlkampf die Korruption im Kosovo und der Klientelismus, also diese Netzwerke. Vetevendosje hat versprochen, das zu ändern und Rechtsstaatlichkeit einzuführen. Wie genau will das jetzt die Regierung machen? Welchen Plan haben Sie da? Und ja, vielleicht können Sie das genau ausführen, bitte.
Good evening, everybody, and I want to thank you for this invitation, and I'm very happy and also very honored to be in Bundestag together also with Vjosa Osmani. We have to praise her for a very good campaign and strengthening also her party, the Democratic League of Kosovo, but also bringing hope back to our country, especially for women. From the time I know Vjosa, it was the year 2010, when she was member of parliament back at that time. I remember her as a person inside the Democratic League of Kosovo who pushed always this cooperation in which we are actually together, Democratic League of Kosovo together with Vetevendosje. But also I want to thank Veton Surroi. He's an outstanding intellectual in our country, but also a very good writer. I don't know whether his books are translated in German, but you should translate his books. I thank also our ambassador, His Excellency Wölfl, Ambassador of Kosovo in Germany here. Thank you for your work, Ambassador. But also organizers of this event, Südosteuropa-Gesellschaft, and also Europa Union Parliamentary group, which organized this event. I'll say that, I'm also optimistic that this government will be formed within a days, and everybody knew that this is going to happen, and everybody knew in Kosovo that these election results of the recent elections, national elections we have, will be like this probably. But what is a very important democratic development in my country is this very fact that both of our parties, so LDK and Vetevendosje, previously explained to the people their will to cooperate with each other and to form the next government. So, having this in mind, what was happening was totally somehow predictable, and so there was no surprise, as in some previous occasions when political parties promised different things and they changed their stances, their attitudes after the results of the election, which was a very, very bad example. So this time, from the beginning, and it's not yesterday, but it was from 2017, we, let's say, built opposition together with Democratic League of Kosovo. Our cooperation was excellent. And in elections, we explained to people that regardless of who will come in the first place, we will form together the government. And that's why people believed us, and that's why people voted us. So this was, I consider this as a very important, democratic development in my country. But of course, also one of our main promise during the election was this fight, uncompromised fight against organized crime and corruption in Kosovo. Corruption in Kosovo, unfortunately, is all spread, I would say, in every part and in every cell of our institutions. This is not just my conclusion, but it was noticed and identified by most important international organizations, also of European Union, which are acting in Kosovo and which, let's say, closely following the performance of our judiciary and our political institutions. So let's take it like a progress report of European Commission. It identifies in Kosovo this, what they call it endemic form of corruption in our institutions. And it's true, because our judiciary was in a way caught by government and by, executive institutions of ruling political parties in Kosovo. And that's why you do not have, independent office of prosecution which fights and, organized crime and corruption. That's why we came with this idea of first reforming our judiciary, as Vjosa explained. It's through what we explained, this project of vetting process in prosecution, in our courts, but also in all of this line of the chain of the judiciary, in order to make sure that people deserve their working places and perform according to the Constitution. Our Constitution says that our judiciary and our prosecution is to fight crime and corruption, but they were not doing well all of these years, from 2001, when we have our institutions. So first, we are going to implement a kind of a responsible government. Second, let's do this vetting process in the judiciary. And then after this, also strengthening the capacities within our ministries, especially on internal affairs, reorganizing our police, also other institutions of law enforcement in my country. This is our plan.
Danke vielmals. Ich möchte gleich weitergehen zum Herrn Surroi. Wir haben jetzt ja gehört, dass diese Regierung ganz sicherlich einen Generationswechsel darstellt, und wenn man mit den Leuten in Kosovo spricht, vor allem mit den jungen Leuten, dann sagen die auch, das ist dringend notwendig gewesen, dass dieser stattfindet. Aber dieser Generationswechsel bedeutet auch, dass erstmals in der Regierung keine Parteien mehr vertreten werden sein, die der ehemaligen UCK nahestehen oder deren Vertreter selbst ehemalige Kämpfer der UCK waren. Und was auch neu ist an dieser Regierung ist, dass die größte serbische Partei, die Srpska Lista, nicht mehr in dem Maße in der Koalitionsvereinbarung drinnen sein wird wie zuvor. Jetzt ist meine Frage, ist das diese ganzen Reformvorhaben, ist das jetzt und diese neue Regierung, kann es wirklich ein Game Changer sein für den Kosovo? Ist es realistisch, dass man diese Reformen umsetzen kann? Und, oder ist es in erster Linie mal ein Generationswechsel? Bitte, Herr Surroi.
Oh, well, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure, as all of my colleagues noted. I think you hit it right on the button. I think we are in a shift that is not necessarily only generational. It has to do with moving into something called modernization, from something called a feudal arrangement of affairs. And there are 3 points which I think are very important to highlight. The first one is women. We have a gender quota in our electoral system by which 30% of the parliament needs to be composed of women. And so the parties have party lists in which every third member that is presented is a woman. In these elections, all of the women of the Vetevendosje list and most of the women of the LDK list won their votes outside of the quota. So they won their votes on their own merits. This is extraordinarily important for our society because in our society, the women, as Vjosa noted, have basically the same opportunity in terms of employment and future as women of Iraq, of Palestine, and of Afghanistan. Now, a society in which women are deprived of economic opportunities, in that same society, women won their votes on their own merits from outside the quota. And this is an enormous change, an evolution, or revolution, if you want to call it, in our society. The second element is that in the past 20 years, we've had governments composed on a system of dividing the feudal spoils. So the parties, which to a great extent were feudalized in the form of operation, got to a point in which the day after the election they would sit down and say, okay, these are my ministries, these will be my men mostly, some women as well. And we will divide these spoils into our own ministries, and we've had an exponentially growing government up to the last government that was composed of 21 ministries and an unknown number of deputy ministers, not even the prime minister knew how many deputy ministers he had at the time. Where we are now at is, and these agreements were reached within hours. There was no need to negotiate because it was basically dividing territories of influence, which is what happened. In this case, we've had a serious negotiating process, and this is a revolution in that sense, because we've had a rational approach to politics in which there was maybe some people might think too much rationalizing about too many details, but this is actually much, much better than than the approach before. And the third element, which we have to take into account, because Kosovo is not only an unfinished conflict in terms of its relationship with Serbia, but that unfinished conflict has also an internal dimension within Kosovo, and that is that we have produced a much more limited scale than China, one country with two systems. In these elections, we've had a clearly marketed democratic development within the majority of the territory, but we've had a clearly manifested detrimental democratic process in the areas in which the Serbs are a majority within Kosovo. There was direct interference and direct physical intimidation of people who are not linked politically to Belgrade. And the outright result of these elections is that we have a clear democratically elected majority and opposition in the Albanian case, but we have only a clearly elected majority within the Serbian list that has been produced through direct physical intimidation and influence from Belgrade. So that's the nature of cohabitation within the Kosovo parliament, and therefore the complication of inclusion of the Serbian list within the next government. Of course, the third element of the Srpska lista shooting itself in the foot is that it is continuously saying that it speaks in the name of Belgrade, and that its president is Mr. Vučić, and that its prime minister is Ms. Brnabić. If that is the case, why would the Kosovo authorities speak to the loudspeakers of the Belgrade policy? Why not speak to Belgrade directly? Why do they need to have somebody like this within the government? This will complicate the situation, but it is better in this kind of differentiation to have clarity on both sides and to say that Srpska lista will not be in the government on its own merits.
Ich würde noch gerne nachfragen, es sind ja auch die Parteien, die der Vučić mehr nahestanden, jetzt nicht mehr in der Regierung oder werden nicht mehr in der Regierung sein. Gleichzeitig gibt es ja weiterhin die Arbeit des Sondergerichts für Kriegsverbrechen. Und meine Frage ist jetzt, ist es auch eine Chance in der derzeitigen Situation, dass man sich mit den Verbrechen, die begangen wurden, gesellschaftlich leichter auseinandersetzen kann in dieser Regierung, in dieser neuen Regierung? Und auch so, Sie haben die Frauen angesprochen, es ist ja auch ein Gesetz angedacht für die Opfer von sexueller Gewalt. Also denken Sie, dass durch diese neue Regierungskonstellation auch inhaltlich neue Möglichkeiten bestehen in diese Richtung?
I think there are opportunities. There's actually a reset, if you will, in the way we will be treating these issues in the future. The first one is the fact that this new government will be composed, I suppose, by people who are not followed by Dick Marty's shadow, puts the government in a totally different position vis-a-vis the dialogue with the government. What has been going on in parallel in the past is that the day that Dick Marty presented the report was also the day in which, at the time, Madame Ashton initiated the negotiations between Kosovo and Serbia. And so these two that went into parallel might have been felt by people in Kosovo as a form of intimidation, and might have been felt by people negotiating on behalf of Kosovo as a continuous warning of the end result. And so disassociating these two issues, the negotiating process with whatever happens on the war crimes front, is very important. The negotiations need to go on by themselves, by their own merits. The second point is that the war crimes and opening of the war crimes issue is going to be more complicated, but it is going to be more necessary. On the one side, we have kids who have been born in 1999 and have grown up until today. They are 20 and they have grown up in Kosovo in a war narrative. They live in a narrative of war and they should shift to a narrative of peace. And we have people in Serbia who have not only, the kids in Serbia who have not only grown in a narrative of war, but are now going through a revision process by which there has been no genocide, neither in Bosnia nor in Kosovo nor everywhere else. And this is making it difficult for both of these societies. Both of our societies are generations that are losing hope. And the way to recreate that is actually to readdress the question of war crimes in the way in which you have actually asked, which is the issue of sexual violence, the issue of the missing people. There are 1,650 missing people still. There are, the day before yesterday, President Vučić went to Batajnica airport, where he received new Russian helicopters. About 700 meters or 1 kilometer from the place where he received those helicopters, there was a mass grave of 700 Albanians killed during the war in Đakovo, transported in meat trucks during the war, and put in those mass graves. Now, the president who received the symbolic of receiving these military helicopters, attack helicopters from Russia, but at the same time trying not to address the issue of war crimes, is actually, it symbolizes that society today. What needs to be done in both societies, and you cannot deal with war crimes in one society, you need to deal with war crimes per se, war crimes as such, is to try to open up the story of all the civilians that have been killed in the past war, of all of those people who have been executed, of kids who have been shot. And I'm saying kids, I'm not saying Albanian kids, Serbian kids, I'm just saying kids who have been shot, of women who have been raped. And try to discuss, try to give this narrative of what war actually produces, in order to create a condition in which we not only see what war produces, but who is the perpetrator in that war, and what kind of society produces this war. And this is extremely important. I think we have a good opportunity with, I'm also optimistic, and by the way, it's the first time I speak positively about a government in Kosovo, and one that is not even being formed by the government. I'm very, I hope actually, I have great hope that this will happen.
Ja, danke vielmals. Zum wohl umstrittensten Thema möchte ich jetzt kommen. Frau Osmani, der Dialog mit Serbien ist jetzt lange Zeit auf Eis gelegen und es haben sich ja auch einige Umstände geändert. Wir haben gehört, es gibt ganz viel Misstrauen gegenüber der Srpska-Liste, die unter der Kontrolle von Belgrad steht. Aber auch eines der wichtigsten Anreize, in diesem Dialog weiterzukommen, nämlich die Aussicht, dass damit die EU-Erweiterung einen Schritt näher kommt, hat sich durch die Ereignisse der letzten Monate doch sehr abgeschwächt. Jetzt ist für mich die Frage auch, wenn ich mit dem Präsidenten von Serbien kürzlich geredet habe, dem Herrn Vučić, der hat zu mir gesagt, also es kommt überhaupt nicht, also er schließt aus, dass es eine Vereinbarung zwischen Serbien und Kosovo gibt, wenn es keine Grenzänderungen gibt. Das sind schon sehr starke Positionen, die da auf dem Tisch sind. Wie sehen Sie das? Wie sehen Sie die Möglichkeit, dass der Dialog gelingen kann, dass es eine Vereinbarung geben kann? Werden Sie sich dafür einsetzen, dass zumindest jene Dinge, die bereits ausgemacht worden sind, zwischen Serbien und Kosovo endlich alle umgesetzt werden? Und meine Frage ist auch diese Debatte, die wir jetzt haben seit 1,5, 2 Jahren, über mögliche Grenzänderungen oder einen Gebietstausch vom Tisch?
The land swap and border changes ideas is off the table since October 6th. The biggest opponents of such a plan were Mr. Kurti and myself, and if we're going to govern together, if there's one thing that is for sure, that is that there will be absolutely no talks on changing our borders. We consider that the discussions, sometimes secret and sometimes under the auspices of the EU on such a topic, have not only been an attack on Kosovo's sovereignty and its statehood, but also posed quite a danger for the entire region and took us back to ideas of the 19th century when the territory was always what mattered and the fate of the people never mattered. So it would simply lead to scenarios where we would have what some people call a peaceful ethnic cleansing, but with all due respect, ethnic cleansing is always a crime. Peaceful or not, it's still an international crime. So no, there will be no such talks, but that doesn't mean that Kosovo is not ready to continue the dialogue with Serbia. We have absolutely no reason to be afraid of that process. Absolutely none. We believe that reaching a final deal with Serbia will open a new perspective for economic development for our country and for the entire region. But we also believe that we need to make sure that we explain to all the people of Kosovo how they can benefit from this process. For the past 6.5 years, instead of focusing on explaining how do the people benefit from the agreements, the 33 agreements that we've reached in Brussels, the focus was on how to make sure that the two leaders get along with one another. How do they get that final historical handshake? But no one really cared about what happened afterwards, which is why today, over 90% of the agreements that were reached in Brussels are still not implemented by Serbia, according to both European observers, but also civil society in Serbia itself. Now, we have agreed with Vetevendosje if that agreement is finally signed. One of the things that we have included is that we're going to not revisit those agreements, but we're going to look at their level of implementation and see what are the problems that we're facing, what can be implemented, what is impossible to be implemented. For example, such as the one on the Association of Municipalities, which was deemed unconstitutional by our constitutional court, and therefore we cannot go ahead and implement it. But Kosovo is absolutely ready to make the effort as it always did, because we see the dialogue is the only way to resolve disputes. But the status of Kosovo is not a dispute. The status of Kosovo has been resolved once and forever on the 17th of February 2008. And more than half of the world, most of the democratic world agrees with that assertion. The sooner Serbia does, the better for the prospects of the Serbian people. I think even now, and it is unfortunate for Serbia itself, but also for the entire region, when we hear Vučić still talking that what he cares is a piece of territory, never ever talking about the rights of the Serbs, shows that they are being governed with the logic of the past century. We should, as the next government, make sure that the conditions that we create for our citizens are such that all Serbs and Turks and Bosnians and Roma and everyone living in Kosovo feel equal. They feel that their rights are being protected, that their rights are being implemented. And if you talk to the Serbs in north of Kosovo, they are not afraid of us sitting here. They are afraid of the gangs in the north that have been supported, incited, and financed by Vučić. So they are insecure because of Serbia. They are not insecure because of Kosovo leadership. In fact, not even the other parties that will from now on be in opposition. They were never, the Serbs were not insecure because of the Albanian majority political parties. They were insecure because of the wrong decisions of Vučić, who is still keeping them hostage of wrong policies and continuing to glorify Milosevic's policies. So yes, there is a potential for an agreement if we say it out loud, we say the truth and nothing but the truth, that Serbia is still in a state of denial, that it has never apologized nor brought before justice the perpetrators of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. And for that reason, it should not be treated as the spoiled child of the European Union, because the EU is trying to keep them away from Russia. In fact, what this resulted in is a Serbia that is more linked to Russia now than ever in these past 20 years, both politically, economically, and militarily, as it was mentioned before. So apparently this approach, by trying to make Vučić the modern pro-European that he isn't, is not going to work. In fact, it only encouraged Serbia towards keeping destabilizing the region. And they're not only destabilizing Kosovo through its north, but also Bosnia, and I'm sure if you talk to other friends in our region, they will tell you the same. Kosovo was always the constructive party in this process. The mere fact that despite that there was no justice for the victims of Kosovo, we again sit together with Serbia in the same table. It's beyond human imagination. So we are doing our utmost to contribute to peace. But we should also keep in mind, and especially Germany knows this better than anyone, any other country in the world, that there can be no peace without justice. And there haven't been peace for the victims in Kosovo. Not for the little children, not for those who were burned down alive. And as I said, it is our job to talk about these sufferings, to talk about these victims as long as there's no justice. Seek justice. But at the same time, we are very much aware that we need to build a proper plan on what should be discussed in the dialogue table. Issues related to trade, issues related to economic cooperation, issues related to freedom of movement of goods, of people, recognition of documents. But you know what? We've already achieved so much of that in Brussels, in these 33 agreements, but Serbia isn't implementing. Let me conclude, I know I'm taking this time. What I heard from a diplomat that has been dealing with Serbia for the past 30 years is this. With Serbia, there are two sets of negotiations. There is one until you make them sign something. And then there's the second, to make them implement what they've signed. The second is always more difficult than the first one. So this is what we're dealing with right now, a state of non-implementation for the promises that they gave, a state of non-implementation for the agreements that we signed. So the final deal should not only be something that gets the approval of our people, but something that is also implementable in practice. And that would absolutely rule out any deal that would make Kosovo violate its territorial integrity.
Ja, danke vielmals, Frau Osmani, für dieses klare Statement. Frau Schütz, wie sieht man das im Außenamt? Wie realistisch ist es, dass es zu einem Abkommen kommen wird? Und welche Aussichten gibt es für die Wiederaufnahme des Dialogs, wann könnte das passieren und wie kann die deutsche und die europäische Politik diese Reformgeist, den man dann jetzt sieht, unterstützen?
Ja, vielen Dank. Zunächst nochmal zur deutschen Position, Grenzveränderung. Ich glaube, alle hier im Saal kennen diese Position. Die deutsche Bundesregierung ist da auch sehr deutlich gewesen. Wir haben, genau wie Frau Osmani das jetzt auch gesagt hat, immer gewarnt davor, dass Grenzveränderungen neue Runden aufreißen, ethnische Grenzen auf dem Balkan haben im 19. und im 20. Jahrhundert zu viel Blutvergießen geführt und sind keine Lösung. Insbesondere da natürlich die Liste der zu lösenden Themen damit auch keineswegs erschöpft ist. Es gibt also, wenn es wirklich um eine gegenseitige Anerkennung gibt, eine lange Liste von Themen, die behandelt werden müssen und die nicht einfach durch Grenztausch gelöst werden. Deswegen haben wir auch immer gesagt, wir sind für ein Abkommen, das nachhaltig ist, das auch umgesetzt werden kann und insbesondere das beiträgt zur Stabilität in der Region. Natürlich ist das nicht einfach, das ist ganz klar. Und gerade auch wenn man sich die Palette der Themen ansieht, Frau Osmani hat ja auch schon einige davon genannt, und sicherlich gehört auch die Frage der Versöhnung mit dazu und den Missing Persons, dann braucht man einen ordentlichen, einen gut strukturierten Verhandlungsprozess, natürlich auch jeweils mit Experten, die sich dann hinsetzen und diese Dinge regeln und sicherlich auch zunächst einmal schauen, was es in den 33 Abkommen schon alles gibt. Wann die Gespräche jetzt wieder aufgenommen werden, da bin ich, glaube ich, jetzt die Falsche, das zu beantworten, aber wir hoffen natürlich sehr, dass bald ein Weg gefunden wird und Ende April gab es ja auch hier in Berlin ein Treffen der Premierminister-Leaders der Westbalkanländer, auch mit dem Ziel, Kosovo und Serbien zu helfen, diese Hürde zu überwinden, und wir sind nach wie vor auch dazu bereit. Aber natürlich sehen wir jetzt vor allen Dingen auch den hohen Repräsentanten, den neuen hohen Repräsentanten an. Das ist jetzt seine Aufgabe, und insofern ist es sehr gut, dass er schon gesagt hat, dass er Kosovo, Serbien zu einem seiner Prioritäten machen wird, und wir hoffen, dass da auch wirklich die erforderliche Unterstützung kommen wird.
Ja, danke vielmals. Herr Konjufca, es gibt ja nicht nur jetzt eine neue Kommission, einen neuen europäischen Repräsentanten, sondern auch zwei amerikanische Sondergesandte, die sich um das Thema kümmern. Einerseits den Herrn Palmer, andererseits den für den Dialog zuständigen Botschafter Grenell. Jetzt gab es ja immer wieder auch Vetevendosje gegenüber einige Vorbehalte, dass Vetevendosje Teil der kosovarischen Regierung werden kann, weil Vetevendosje für eine bestimmte skeptische Haltung, würde ich mal sagen, gegenüber der internationalen Gemeinschaft bekannt war. Wie ist jetzt so die Beziehung Ihrer Partei zu den USA? Hat sich da was verändert? Wie sehen Sie das? Und ich wollte auch noch ganz konkret auf etwas ansprechen, was immer für ganz große Vorbehalte gesorgt hat in der internationalen Gemeinschaft gegenüber Ihrer Partei. Und zwar war das Ziel, Großalbanien zu schaffen, das ja nach wie vor noch nicht aufgegeben wurde. Jetzt wollte ich Sie fragen, verfolgen Sie weiterhin dieses Ziel, auch wenn Sie jetzt in der Regierung sitzen, und weil das könnte ja auch einen Einfluss haben auf diese Verhandlungen mit Serbien.
This is a dangerous question.
Ganz so interessant ist es nicht.
The issue could be explained as the dilemma between whether, as somebody says, we are changing during the time, or whether they are getting to know us better. I think it's the second. So, because there was much of miscommunication and misunderstanding, I think, of positions. And now we have excellent cooperation with the Embassy of the United States, and Ambassador Kosnet just gave an interview last week. He praised elections, and he said that the message of the people was very clear and firm, and the government should be established, and that the United States support this government and the next coalition between LDK and Vetevendosje, which is very good, I think. And it's not just the position of the embassy of United States, but I would say of twin countries, so of Germany, of other very important European Union countries, which is good news for Kosovo. But concerning dialogue with Serbia, I'll say that this is still a kind of ongoing gravity, or let's say inertia of pace, which started on June 2018, I would say. So it was precisely the time when our president introduced this very dangerous idea of the land swap, 1.5 years from now. And once it came publicly, I can say that it caused unimaginable harm to our statehood, to the statehood of Kosovo. Because in a way, from that time, Serbia misused this idea also to persuade many countries, at least more than 10 countries, I think, members of United Nations, to withdraw their recognitions of the Republic of Kosovo. But with Serbia, dialogue will be very difficult, and it will be difficult because of the simple reason. It's because of what Vučić is asking. He is asking for territory, and we will not afford that. So if this is the case, then, I'm sorry.
Ich wollte Sie nur fragen, noch einmal wegen Großalbanien, wie Sie zu dieser Frage stehen und ob Sie dieses Ziel weiterverfolgt werden. Großalbanien.
Do you want me to answer that?
Well, I was explaining a totally different thing and you jumped to...
No, this was my question.
For Great Albania?
Yes.
I think there is no Great Albania as such. I think that there are two states, state of Republic of Albania and state of Republic of Kosovo. And national elections were for Kosovo on the 6th of October. So we have to fix Kosovo and to, let's say, fulfill all of our promises we just put in this electoral campaign of September this year. So what I will say is that if you see the main indicators of Kosovo, social, political and economic indicators, the situation is grave, I would say. Just take some of these, like Kosovo lost already 17% of population from the time we declared independence in year 2008. It's a huge amount of population we are losing. The second is that 2 weeks from now, PISA test was conducted, in education, and Kosovo came at the very end of the list, at the very bottom of the countries who participated in this project. And the third is if you take economy, you'll see that our trade balance is already 9-1 in favor of imports. We have to change all of this, landscape, the political climate, the political mentality, and we have thousands of works to do. After we finished all of this, we can talk for other things.
Offensichtlich ist Großalbanien nicht so eine Top-Agenda jetzt. Herr Surroi, ich wollte zum Schluss etwas ansprechen, was das Thema des Tages ist, nämlich die Verleihung des Literaturnobelpreises an Peter Handke. Meine Frage an Sie wäre, wie sehr hat das die Bemühungen um Versöhnung, aber auch um den Kampf gegen den Revisionismus, der in Südosteuropa ja sehr, sehr stark ist, beeinflusst. Welche Auswirkungen dieses Literaturnobelpreises sehen Sie?
Well, I have I don't know how to explain. I have a distance in communicating on values, on literary values and politics, and so Peter Handke, I actually haven't read much of him. I've tried to read one of his novels, but so I could not evaluate his literary capacity. I have known and have read plenty of Handke's political statements, and they are part of that revisionism idea that is now driving a lot of Serbian policy. Unfortunately, it's not. If we take it into a greater dimension, the question is, there are two present currents, and the first one is, can you build on an unfinished conflict? Can you conceptually try to reconcile while your conflict is still open? And this is the question that is haunting Bosnia and Herzegovina for the last 25 years. And this is the question that is haunting Kosovo ever since. If you build a state like Bosnia and Herzegovina by saying, okay, you've had your war, you've had your genocide, but why don't you sit and work it out together somehow, and you'll sort it out eventually. Here's your peace deal, and now you go along and find your way in which you can live together. You get to a point in which the greatest hero in Republika Srpska is still Radovan Karadzic and Ratko Mladic. And where the narrative of the politics in the past 25 years is that the Serbs were actually the Bosnian Serbian army was protecting the Serbian people from genocide. And this is the official narrative. If you in Kosovo get to the point in which 20 years afterward you cannot actually get to a point in which you know who was the perpetrator and who was the occupying force and who was doing what and who was killing kids, you get to a point in which you are trying to do the impossible because you're juggling the balls in the air and you're saying, okay, now let's bring 3 more balls into this whole thing. And the question in Kosovo is actually finishing the conflict and then getting to reconciliation, and how to do these two things at the same time is actually what is capturing the attention. There's a way to it, and the way to it is something that has been done in reconciliation in Europe in general, but be aware, there are 2 missing moments, or 3 missing moments. The first one is wars have not ended. The conflicts have not ended. Kosovo and Serbia are not at peace with each other. Differing from Germany and France, and who in totally different historic conditions got to it. The second missing element is there's a lack of a security umbrella. While we are speaking, we have now a remilitarized Serbia that has been that has been arming itself far beyond all of its neighbors. 2 years ago, Serbia imported $750, I think, $million on arms, whereas all the neighbors, all the Western Balkan countries, spent less than 600 million. So you have a clear difference in arming. Lacking a security umbrella that will unify all of these neighbors, we are again in conditions in which the Cold War or the re-energized Russia is entering the scene, trying to compete in disrupting the Western integration processes, both in terms of military and both. And the third missing element is that there is not an overall political idea of how to integrate the Western Balkans instead. As we are speaking, we have now 2 or 3 competing political processes. The first one is the old idea that's the Thessaloniki process, that you have this European perspective, that somehow the countries will find their way to European integration. And this has been going on for now almost 20 years. You have the second process, which is Mr. Macron saying, no, I'm sorry, this does not function. And we need to re-look at the whole, not only at the whole integration process, but the whole integration process within the way in which the European Union functions. And then there's a third competing process, which is this mini-Schengen idea, which is basically very loosely named. There's no mini-Schengen, but it's the idea of creating a Western Balkans Western Balkans economic union. And these 3 are not correlated, none of these 3. And lacking a clear political integration idea, there cannot be a reconciliation. So we are speaking of missteps in with lack of music and lack of instructions of how to do it.
Danke vielmals. Ich möchte Sie jetzt alle einladen, Fragen zu stellen und würde Sie bitten, sich vorzustellen und auch zu benennen, an wen Sie die Frage richten, sich kurz zu fassen und insbesondere, wenn Sie ein kleines Statement machen wollen, sich kurz zu fassen. Bitte schön, ich werde 3 Wortmeldungen zuerst aufnehmen und dann die nächste Runde machen. Hier bitte, dann hier und dann hier, habe ich gesehen. Ja, gut.
Ja, vielen Dank für die Ausführung und ich habe mich besonders gefreut über die Aussage, dass der Lenzwort vom Tisch ist. Ich habe eine ganz naive Frage, ich komme aus dem Bundeswirtschaftsministerium. Die Einführung der Zölle durch Haradinaj haben wir ja auch gesehen als ein Stoppschild, um diesen Lenzwort zu verändern. Wenn der jetzt vom Tisch ist, wäre die neue kosovarische Regierung in der Lage, diese Zölle wieder zurückzunehmen und damit einen ersten Schritt für eine Wiederbelebung des Dialogs mit Belgrad zu tun.
Danke. Drüben war, glaube ich, die zweite, bitte.
Boyd Weber from the Democratization Policy Council. I'm going to ask my question in English because it's for the 2 guests from the future ruling coalition from Kosovo. Ms. Osmani, you mentioned the reforms, the planned ones in the rule of law sector, and you mentioned the term vetting process. Could you give us a bit more detail about what is planned there? Is this a kind of complete reappointment process of judges and prosecutors? Given the fact that you already had a reappointment process in Kosovo, given the fact that vetting processes are probably the most massive political intervention into judiciary aimed at shielding away the judiciary from political influence, and given the fact that in the region we had vetting processes, those that were led by domestic political elites all were corrupted. The one model process that were led by the national community in Bosnia, the results have still since been annulled after handing over political leadership to domestic elites. So that is my first question. My question to Mr. Glauk, Konjufca, it was mentioned that the very fact that we had multi-party elections that led to peaceful change of government, or will lead to peaceful change of government, is a massive positive sign for the democratization in the region. However, it has not been mentioned that in the 2 months after the election day, with the whole recounting and appeals processes, basically this positive image has almost completely been destroyed again. With something coming back to hand Kosovo, that is the agreed reform of the unreformed electoral system, agreed a decade ago and never implemented. So my question to you is the long overdue reform process of the electoral system part of your ruling coalition agenda? And my final joint question, you may correct me, but my understanding is unlike in other policy fields on the dialogue with Serbia, you have not defined a very detailed joint policy position here. So as you have Ms. Osmani has mentioned already, one of the most contentious issues, it's the association of Serb municipalities. I wanted to ask whether there is a joint position there, given the fact that in previous years, my understanding is there were differences between your two parties. So my question here is, and maybe both of you can give a short yes or no answer, is given if the context we had a comprehensive agreement that included territorial integrity and recognition by Serbia, given that we had an agreement in there on the association that would include basically the results of the ruling of the Constitutional Court on the association in 2015 that you mentioned. That means on the one side that it is based on basically the Kosovo principles of intermunicipal cooperation and not creating a third layer of governance, and on the other side that it puts away with the issues, the collision of discrimination of non-Serbs in these municipalities, that is a kind of review based on the European Convention of Human Rights. Given that there is an agreement on the association under those conditions, which would be a revision of the agreements on the agreement, would both of your parties agree on having an association or not? Thank you.
Okay, das waren jetzt schon einige Fragen, deswegen werde ich jetzt zuerst zur Beantwortung kommen. Erstens die Zölle. Können diese 100% Zölle auf serbische und bosnische Waren jetzt aufgehoben werden?
When it was first introduced, the tariff was a perfectly legitimate measure towards Serbia, given their very aggressive campaign towards Kosovo, both in terms of their due recognition efforts as well as the non-tariff barriers that they imposed on Kosovo. But throughout the time, what Haradinaj mentioned as the main argument for keeping the tariff in force was, to quote him, he wants to stop further talks on territory. Well, he doesn't need a tariff to stop further talks on territory, because we will not talk on territory any longer. So practically what we've discussed with our potential coalition partner is to suspend the tariff, however, to replace it with reciprocity measures. I will not be able to say today in this conference, since it's still a confidential discussion between ourselves and Vetevendosje on how we build those reciprocity measures. But what I can say right now is that many of those reciprocity measures were actually agreed in the 33 agreements, be it in recognition of documents or stamps. So the EU would not be in the position to ask us not to ask for those measures, because we agreed on those reciprocity measures under the EU auspices in Brussels. But there is lots more in terms of the non-tariff barriers that Serbia is imposing on Kosovo goods. I mean, according to regional organizations, while it takes Serbian goods 1 day to get to Kosovo, a few hours, it takes more than 40 days for Kosovo goods to go through procedures that Serbia would be imposing, thus making it extremely difficult, and that's why we have this great disbalance between the export and the import of 400 versus 1 with Serbia. So reciprocity instead of the tariff. Reciprocity in full compliance with international trade law. Reciprocity just like any other sovereign country does. Precisely what Germany would do, precisely what the United States would do, nothing short of that. I hope that answers your question. Should I go on with the rest? Or?
Ich wollte Sie fragen, Herr Konjufca, wie das mit dem Wahlgesetz ist. Ist es Teil der Reform des Wahlgesetzes? Ist es Teil der Reform?
Yes, it is, and I want to add some points on this. First is that there are two dimensions of elections in Kosovo, I would say. First is this percentage of the political parties, which comes very fast and it's very effective. Like after 2 or 3 hours, you just know probably where you stand and what is the position and rankings of political parties. So just after 2 or 3 hours, after station polls were closed in Kosovo, Democratic Party of Kosovo leader just came out and said that we will be in opposition because we lost these elections. So in this regard, in this dimension, you have very effective process of functioning very well. But there is another dimension because of the open list. We have the open list in elections, which the voter could choose 5 guys to vote. Then there is this very complicated second part of election, which you have to count everybody's votes, and there are hundreds of complaints by the candidates whether their votes were precise and right. But I think that the most damaging decision in these recent elections was a decision by Central Election Commission to change the rules and the laws in the midst of the process, which was very, very bad, I think. Why? It has to do with these votes of coming from Serbia, which Vetevendosje was always complaining about these votes. We always submit a complaint in our institutions that these votes should not be counted, and failed in 2 national elections to achieve that. So we learned the lesson that these votes are legal and should complain anymore. And when we just accepted this, in the midst of the process, they changed the rules of the game and they said that, okay, we're going to remove like 3,000 something votes, and that's it caused trouble in our system. So, of course we were against these votes, but much more important is the credibility of functioning of the state of law. So if you have like constitutional state functioning and the law which is precise and the rules of the game which everybody knows, then you know how to behave. But interpreting the law according to your particular interest, this is the end of the democratic state, I'll say. And this unfortunately happened in our...
Danke vielmals. Ganz kurz vielleicht zur Frage Justizreform, Vetting-Prozess und die Frage, kann es einen Verband der serbischen Gemeinden geben, falls dieser der kosovarischen Verfassung entspricht? Ganz kurz nur, weil ich möchte anderen noch eine Chance geben, zu fragen.
On vetting, Bodo, I hope you will stay during the reception so that I can explain this in detail. We do have a detailed plan. I know exactly what were the problems in 2008 because I followed the vetting process then, and we are learning from the mistakes of other countries in the region. We don't want to do it alone. The process will have local ownership, but we've asked for the help of our partners from Germany, the UK, the US, but also the EU as such. We will be working closely with the Venice Commission of the Council of Europe to make sure that we have a very successful process that is not politically motivated at all. But we will, I'll get back to you on details because on the association of municipalities, we insist that the Constitutional Court decision is respected. Therefore, nothing can happen without the principles laid out in that decision. So if there would be some sort of an NGO association that would bring municipalities together to cooperate, it first of all has to be multi-ethnic because our constitution requires that every public institution is multi-ethnic. And second, it cannot have executive powers that would put this as a third layer of governance and thus make our country non-functional.
Danke vielmals. Hier war eine Frage, dann Herr Sarrazin habe ich gesehen, aber es sind noch viele Fragen. Und hier kommt dann, vielleicht geht es sich noch aus. Bitte. Ich glaube, Sie waren so.
Mein Name ist Romeo Franz, ich bin Europaabgeordneter und bin auch Leiter der Delegation Bosnien-Herzegowina und Kosovo. Ich war auch in der im Wahlbeobachtungsteam bei der letzten Wahl in Kosovo und muss sagen, ich war ein bisschen in Prestenice, also am äußersten Ende von Kosovo bis hin nach Pristina und Pristina. Wir können das bestätigen, dass die Bürgerinnen und Bürger dort sehr engagiert waren, ein fast nahezu perfektes Wahlablauf zu garantieren. Und da war ich tatsächlich bis im kleinsten Dorf im Kosovo, war man da sehr, sehr engagiert. Und das muss man wirklich loben. Meine Frage wäre jetzt etwas in eine ganz andere Richtung. Die Arbeitslosigkeit der Menschen mit Romno-Hintergrund liegt da bei ungefähr 90% in Kosovo. Antiziganismus ist auch im Kosovo ein Problem, das eine gleichberechtigte Teilhabe für viele dieser Bürger verhindert. Was für Ideen haben Sie für diese Aufgabe? Und die zweite Frage wäre der Umweltschutz. Zum Teil herrscht ein unverantwortlicher Umgang mit Abfall im Kosovo. Das heißt, Sie haben ein großes touristisches Potenzial im Kosovo und ich habe das wirklich bewundert, was für eine schöne Gegend es ist und in diesen schönen Forellenbächen und in den Wäldern liegt tatsächlich eine große Anzahl von Müll und Bauschutt rum, das auch sehr gefährlich wieder ist für die Bürgerinnen und Bürger. Also um diese Situation, diese Problematik auch zu bearbeiten, gerade jetzt im europäischen Thema von Umwelt und dem Klimawandel, muss ja das stark bearbeitet werden. Wird das ein Thema bei Ihnen sein?
Okay. Hier war noch eine Frage von Herrn Sarrazin.
I represent a small association in Stuttgart, and we are called Education Unlimited. Now, for a couple of years, we've been organizing workshops, summer camps, and especially exchange programs between Kosovo schools and schools in Baden-Württemberg. And what I want to do to you two politicians from Kosovo is to make an appeal to you. Somebody has just said that the PISA results were very bad for Kosovo. This, believe me, has nothing to do with the intellectual capacities of your children, who I got to know as being ever so eager and ambitious. Having been in schools in Kosovo, I know that it has much more to do with the missing and lacking resources. And when I flew home last time after staying in Pristina, I said to him, I was as frustrated as your kids, realizing that they do not have the same chances as our children in Germany. And this is my basic wish, that you work hard in those forthcoming years for your children, to grant them, because they deserve support and they are yearning for a future. And they ask us questions like, your country, I mean, this country was lying in ruins 70 years ago. How come that you have developed as you have so positively, and why can't we do that in our country? And so they are, as I said, eager, ambitious, and with a very high standard. For example, English. We were talking English with each other, and their standard is very, very high. And I know what sort of books and materials they have, or rather not have. So I also organize, books being sent down to Kosovo, things like that. This is an appeal to you two to please work hard for the children of your country. Thank you.
Danke vielmals, Herr Sarrazin, bitte.
Yeah, Parliamentary. After Adelheid tried to provoke you a bit, Glauk, on the Great Albania question, and you were quite efficiently steering through this difficult waters. I will try to make it a bit more brutal, trying again. Frankly, you say that the land swap idea and the campaign of Serbia for having states taking back the recognition is a threat for integrity of the state of Kosovo. So I don't understand why the program of dissolving Kosovo into a new state is not also a threat for the integrity of the state of Kosovo. The most important argument against land swap, or one of the most ones, is that the borders in the region are drawn. I don't see why deleting a border in another sense than a European integration, real Schengen, de facto deleting, but the deleting of the nation is not also a changing of the drawn borders. And third, the second most important argument also in Berlin was neighbors who were clearly against. And I clearly remember how important it was that Susanne was going to Berlin for this conference here and clearly saying never with us. I cannot imagine that the neighbors, and I cannot also imagine that the German government would accept a path of a reunified Greater Albanian, whatever entity towards European Union easily. So perhaps on this provocation you would get a more rapid answer from me.
Ja, vielleicht starten wir gleich damit.
You are cooperating very good. The cooperation is excellent on this. First, we have to understand that Albanians in Kosovo and Albanians in Albania are one nation. This is very important in order to understand our discourse when we say that, and what we do. Well, you have recently, very tragic natural event, which was the earthquake, and you call it this also political earthquake, but there was a natural one also in Albania. 50 people died in this earthquake, and in these kind of events, you just see that what nation is, really, how they cooperate with each other, the solidarity, the organization of both countries. This tells you about the identity of the people, and in this we have no dilemmas, we have no doubt as a nation. The second is that what is most important for us, for political parties in Kosovo, is to build Republic of Kosovo. This is our goal. This is our most important aim in actual circumstances. And this is what I call patriotism of this certain historical situation. To build our country, which is independent, which is a republic, and which is organized in political system as a parliamentary republic. So we are committed to strengthen our country and to build kind of a modern, Western, functionalized state, and to integrate our country in NATO and in European Union. This is our goal. How long it will take, I don't know. It will be years, of course, but we will do that. And the last one is that we will cooperate with every country of the Balkans, especially with the neighboring country. But everybody knows that we will have always a special ties and a special cooperation with Albania. Why is this? Because when you are one nation, you can create very good projects starting from economy to education, on cooperation, and helping people for a better life. So when we say that we will do that, it's against nobody. It's against nobody. Like your government just helped us your government financed the joining of energetical systems of our country. We think that these kind of projects, we can do it also by ourselves, but also with the projects and the help of European Union. And when I say special cooperation, I mean it in this regard, in this terms, like economic, education, academia, university, culture. It's everything. It's much easier because we have one identity, it's one nation, so it's a good platform of cooperation when you have this kind of historical and political circumstances. So against this, nobody should afraid from this. And this is totally normal in this kind of Western standards of today's Europe cooperation.
Ja, also wir wissen jetzt noch immer nicht, ob die Idee des gemeinsamen Staates vom Tisch ist oder nicht, aber ich muss zum Abschluss kommen und würde deswegen die Frau Osmani bitten, auf die Frage der Arbeitslosigkeit der Roma oder prinzipiell der Inklusion der Roma kurz einzugehen und auf die Frage des Umweltschutzes. Was kann die neue Regierung da tun bei diesen zwei Dingen?
What we've seen so far is numerous national strategies on the inclusion of Roma, Ashkani and Egyptian minority communities. Unfortunately, they still face a lot of discrimination in many areas, which leads to their high level of unemployment, horrible position in terms of health problems like not being vaccinated and the rest. What we will do is focus on implementation. We don't need to form new working groups and draft new strategies, but we need to make sure that implementation is what we focus on. I think in this government, the non-Serb minority communities have the best chance that they've ever had in these 20 years to move forward their interests, because it's going to be the first time, perhaps, we still don't know what's going to happen with Lista Srpska, but the non-Serb minority communities will have the most crucial role among non-minority minority communities in forming the government. When they are so crucial, because we can't really form a government without them, they should use this opportunity to move forward with projects that would better the life of the community they represent. That's the first thing. On environmental protection, probably this is the very first time that a coalition agreement includes issues of environment. It's the very first time in Kosovo's history. I've recently said that no matter what will be my position in these future institutions, I will personally take on the issue of environmental protection and especially air pollution, knowing the detrimental health effects that it's having, especially on the children of Kosovo. So environment is crucial. This is one of the key reasons why we've agreed with Vetevendosje not to continue with one of the big energetic coal projects that the previous government had agreed to finance, which shows the great commitment that we have towards environment protection. We have also put issues related to protection of rivers in our coalition agreement, and we will be stopping some of the potentially corruptive affairs on hydro plants that the previous government had given licenses to, because it's truly destroying the rivers as the most important water resources for our country. There's a lot more, but because of the time constraints, I hope we can continue our discussion during the reception.
Ja, danke vielmals. Wegen der zeitlichen Begrenzungen möchte ich diese Diskussion jetzt auch schließen und mich ganz herzlich bei Ihnen bedanken fürs Zuhören, für die Beiträge, fürs Mitdenken und Überlegen und ja, für das Abschlusswort auch mal den Herrn Sarrazin bitten. Dankeschön.
Ja, erstmal vielen Dank auch von meiner Seite. I've been said that I should speak in English for closing remarks because our Dolmetscher has to catch up the train. And first, thank you for Dolmetsching us. And have a good run to the station, actually. So, also just to close up, I think we got a really good impression about tasks, challenges, but also possibilities of the future of the new political situation in Kosovo, and I think that we saw on the one hand that the new generation in different parties is taking the stage, and this is interesting, and I think you've shown that coalition negotiations can be done in public as well. I mean, when we were having these negotiations with the Jamaica coalition, we were always only on this balcony, and the photos were done, and actually I think the kind of talks you had here together would have helped us in finding the Jamaica coalition. So next time if we have problems, perhaps we invite some persons from Kosovo to help us. We will see how successful your government will be until then. Second is that I think that we know that in the region there are important tasks, and I think that the decisive question is also, is the European Union still credible for the future of the region, so that your orientation on the path towards is answered by a clear statement from the European Union towards the region. I would say that the European Union in general is not as clear as I wish it to be, but the German government is really clear, and this is perhaps a thank you to Ms. Schütz. And Veton, now there's no specific thank you, instead of that you had so excellent, intelligent remarks. Thank you also for that. But not only thanking Vjosa Osmani, Glauk, Konjufca, and Veton Surroi and for Schütz, but also Adelheid for the great moderation again. Not only in interviews you are tough and to the point, also in moderating. And next time when you make an interview with Mr. Vjosa, you can also invite me for a collaboration. And also, of course, all the persons from Southeast Europe Association and European Movement, Parliamentary Group, and staff of European Movement Germany. Thank you so much for helping. And as said, there is a drink and something to eat outside, and all questions which are still open to our guests can be raised there. Thank you, Parliamentary.